Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Suzanne. I'm a certified astrologer with specialties in evolutionary astrology, horary astrology, and human design. I use the symbolic language of astrology in the study of energy and cycles to help my clients find their way back to their authentic selves and to help them better navigate this most challenging time. And this is another full moon video, which I also didn't plan to do, but it actually helps me do these videos to help me moderate my reactions to things. It helps me take a step back and understand what's happening collectively so that I don't overreact. And I just wanted to just take a moment and just remind everybody that we're in this really crucial time where the pendulum is really high and things are happening around us that are concerning. And it's hard to keep everything in perspective. And it's easy for our emotions to get the best of us. And I would say that being emotional myself, this has been very difficult. I've been preparing for this moment, and still I just let my mind go and my emotions go, and I start to panic. And I guess it's understandable. It really is understandable in this moment. But overall, it's not helpful because we really need to keep our wits about us as we consciously move forward to figure out strategically what we want to do moving forward, what role we want to play in this new reality. And I say this as a person who is still searching for that. And as an empath, it's really hard for me this time, the way that we're treating people and the way that we're placing blame on each other. And that's coming from leadership. And it's really hard for me to watch. I have a lot of compassion for others, and I wish that I could do more to help, but you become a little bit paralyzed because you have all of your own concerns and your own life to deal with. And all of us are kind of hurting and stretched right now. And so it's very hard for us to apply energy to the other people who are hurting a lot more than we are. And I just wanted to send love to everybody out there who is feeling very distressed right now. Okay, so let's talk about this full moon. But before we move forward, I wanted to look back at the new moon in Aquarius because obviously there were a lot of things that I spoke about that really started to hit. Like I mentioned in my new moon Aquarius video about Uranus going direct, specifically the next day, and how we were moving forward, whether we liked it or not. And a lot of things happened after this video that kind of jolted me, even though I was prepared for it. But, you know, like I said, the new moon in Aquarius was really, you know, what were we going to do? Were we going to follow along? Are we going to belong? Or are we going to rebel? And at that point, we saw a lot of people, and we still are seeing a lot of people kind of discard their values, I guess, if they had them, or that's the perception, and they're going along, you know, and I think that's frustrating for some of us to realize because, you know, money trumps all in these situations, and it's hard for somebody who believes in a higher value system than just money. Money is a reality that we all have to deal with. And so we have to do things that we don't always feel comfortable about. And that line is very specific to each person. And it really depends on how they feel that they need to show up for their family. They have dependents, or what their values are for their community. And sometimes people make hard compromises. And I think I always try to not throw stones at people, but it's very challenging, and I'm not perfect. And I do feel that we all have in us a responsibility to do things that are decent to others, to treat people with respect. No matter the decisions that we need to make, the hardest decisions that we need to make. I'm an Aquarian, and I believe in humanity in general, and I don't believe in treating people with disrespect. And no matter how how different we are. I definitely have my own values about what's right or wrong. And I think everybody has that, their own personal kind of values as far as that goes. And we could talk about that for a long time, about the nuances of that. But this new moon in Aquarius was really, about, okay, well, what are our values, and where is the line between taking a stand versus going with the power structures that we feel we need to go with because it's happening. Okay, and then right after that, we had this Uranus station direct, which I teased in my video that was going to happen. And to be honest, even though I was prepared for this, I was very jolted by what happened, which was a few plane crashes. And a lot of mundane astrologers were aware that this was a possibility and warned people about this. There are cycles that happen where, plane crashes and things like this are more prevalent. And this is one of the periods. Now, when I look at this chart, there's a couple of things that I thought, spoke to this station and what happened afterwards. First of all, we have this moon in Aquarius, which is at the same degree as the Mercury later. So keep this in mind for what we talk about in just a couple of minutes about this full moon. But the moon is void of course when Uranus goes direct. That means it's not making any aspects. It's hanging out there by itself. And when the moon is void of course, it's almost like, the station of Uranus was also impacted with the moon, standing still and not making any aspects. People say in moon void of courses, it's a time when time stops, basically. And so that was very telling. Uranus is here in Washington, D.C.'s first house. And it is, the moon is already past a square. It had just squared Uranus. And then it went void. And as you see, Jupiter is here retrograde on the cusp of the second house, and it's in trine relationship to the sun, which means that it is also stopping. And if you know anything about Jupiter, it's about travel, and it's ruled by Mercury, and it is about flight. Mercury is about flight, and Jupiter represents travel. And here's Mercury right next to Pluto. It's separating from Pluto. And so there is a fated event that's happening with this plane crash. And there was also a lot of, I would say psychological warfare that's happening, especially in response to this plane crash and the blaming that went on, the blaming of the Biden administration, although Trump had just let go of the FAA person involved. The head of FAA. And to be honest, we've made cuts. We've made cuts to the government. And when you do that, the people that remain have to stretch themselves very thinner and thinner. And you have consequences of that because, there's this idea that people shouldn't sleep and people should overwork and work on the weekends. But that can be very dangerous, and actually you can make very bad decisions when you do that. So I don't know why that's glorified when you have really important operations that you need your brain power to actually accomplish. Now, some people can get by with less sleep and some people can't. But it does affect the brain long term. There's a lot of studies that show that. Now, this is nuanced and it's different for everybody. But I would assume by just the normal discourse of people that have been touting this superpower and what they actually accomplish is this is detrimental to their health and to other people that work with them. And then, all of these planets are ruled by Saturn. Saturn is not in a very comfortable place in Pisces. And here's Venus that's in between Saturn and Neptune. And it's on the nodes, and that's one of the signatures of, the plane crashes into the ocean that some of the mundane astrologers have been pointing out. But also, there was a woman involved in one of the helicopters, and there's some innuendos that there's this DEI practice, and that's endangering lives, although proof has it that she was top of her class. And I think that is inclusive of males on her, in her results of the top percentage. So, using that and really, Venus here is elevated in Pisces, she's exalted. And so to use or to imply that her being on that plane is what caused the crash is a little bit shameful. That's why Saturn is here. I was really impressed by some of the diverse reactions that I'm getting from some astrologers about charts. And one of the astrologers who's a Vedic astrologer, the Eye of the Veda, he came out with a chart for one of the ingresses, and he mentioned that, America kind of pulling back and having some more focus on itself is good, because Venus is exalted here, but next to Saturn, they're doing that, but also shaming people. And so in the long run, it is going to be detrimental, I think, to our country. The ways that we're reacting to these situations, whether we make the hard decision to pull ourselves back from the countries that we've been helping, with the closing of these aid countries where we've been providing aid. I think there's a lot to be said for the decency and the ways that we do things. It's going to impact us long term. And I can't imagine that it's going to impact us positively in the long term. The way that you treat others is exactly reflective in the way that they treat you when you are in crisis mode. So whether or not you agree with sending a lot of money outside of the country, I mean, there's a lot of people hurting here. We definitely need to focus more on the people of our country. But we've been tearing people apart, pitting each other against the other, making each other feel less than human, you know? And so I can't imagine that things are going to get better internally, even though we're pulling back. You know, Musk has this, you know, slash and dash of companies, but his companies have not been doing well. And so the people that work for him, you know, it's the people that rise to the top that are going to be the yes men, that are going to benefit from that. But from a country as a whole, as a people as a whole, is that going to benefit them? Probably unlikely. And you have to bend the knee to do that. And that is really about behind the door deals and what you're going to give me and what you're going to do me. It's very tribal. And we're kind of moving away from some of the tribal energy as human design actually talks about a lot. We're moving away from that, and we're moving into an individual energy. Now, we are splitting apart, but the people that are really have learned to follow their own calling, their own inner value system, I think are going to navigate this this time a lot better. Because, you know, you go to one side and something happens and they demonize you, and there's no real side to follow, because eventually you're going to get pushback, you know, from your decisions that you make. So you want to make it from a highest decision calling in your own value system if you really want to live with yourself long term, I think. The interesting thing about these two charts is that you see this is the new moon is on the Aquarius axis at 14 degrees, Aquarius Leo axis, which we'll talk about also in a minute. This has been a theme in these two charts, of course, because it is Aries Leo axis. And this is very much in line with Musk and Trump's Mars, actually. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so now you see that the ascendant, when Uranus went direct, is on the Taurus Scorpio axis. And so the Taurus Scorpio axis is about, you know, stability versus kind of crisis in a way. You know, the Scorpio ruled by Mars, and Mars is here in, you know, very debilitated, very nasty in the third house, you know, really stoking some of the rhetoric that's happening, really stoking very disgracefully, talking about people whose lives have been lost. You know, think about those families. I think that's why they didn't release the woman's name, because the family was like, knew that this was happening, knew that she was going to be raked under the coals. And so when they did come out with her information, they were very positive about it. And I'm glad. I hope that I didn't listen to some of the other discussions about her, but I hope that they didn't desecrate her name. It's very sad. She lost her life. And so to make her an example of whatever political discussions that you want to talk about, and whether it really is a meritocracy or not, to be honest, a lot has not been happening in the actual corporate world around DEI, even though they speak to that a lot. It's, you know, it's still very much weighted toward the white male. So the DEI kind of discussion is kind of not really a discussion at all as far as the results go. Maybe there's some, you know, more active action in the government, and maybe that's why people are so pissed off and say it's like they're, calling them names and making them feel less than and evil for, just having a job and doing what they were told, this whole like deep state or whatever. I'm sure that there's a lot of bureaucracy that happens. I know that there are, and there are some complaints that are valid in that. But to demonize people, and especially taking advantage of tragedies, is pretty low blow, really low energy, and not very decent to do that. And so that really affects kind of how people treat people in general, I think. We're all, taking this in, and a lot of people are demonizing it against their own, citizens, and that's going to take an effect. We already have a lot of violence in this world, in this country. That's really not going to help things. And then during that time when this happened, I also said something very personal about what happened to me and my family out in the open on a public forum, and to illustrate that people don't pay attention until their personal livelihood or their family is affected, or there's something personal about it, because somebody was commenting, you don't blame Black people. They've been protesting with Black Lives Matter, and nobody was aligning with them very well at that time. And so I made that comment, and then I had somebody like it and follow me that made my hair stand on end. It was that Mercury Pluto, moment. That's when I put out that short. And I was really kind of like alarmed about this person, and then alarmed about a couple of other people that followed me. And I was like, I got to be careful. And that's sad. That's really sad, I think, because we're talking about censorship, and really making people afraid to speak out is censorship at the end of the day. So it really depends on whose side you're on as to whether you're being censored or not. And so that's sad. And then, yes, whenever, I don't know when I'm going to post this, but then we had Jupiter turn direct on February 4th. And there was a lot of things happening in the news around that time, and people were starting to move forward and protesting. We've all been kind of paralyzed a little bit with what's going on because it's happening so quickly, and even though we foresaw it, it's really happening much quicker than we thought. And so the reactions are what we're talking about and what we're discussing are alarming. Venus has now gone out of her exaltation and has gone into the sign of her detriment. And there's talk about war and, seizing lands. And there's also concern about what's been going on in the government systems and the payment systems. There's, talk about, Elon Musk going rogue and, getting into access to private information of our payment systems. And, once he has all that information, he has it and he can share it with anybody. And so it's alarming to people. And then there's a lot of talk of layoffs, and people have been coming to me that work in the government system, and trying to figure out what they should do, who they should trust. And these are good people who have families, and there's nothing, to demonize. These people are very smart and very good at what they do and are hard workers. And so, to demonize them, I think is rather unfair, and to not, give them, the decency that procedure allows them to figure out what to do next. That's a decent response to somebody who's worked for you, and especially if they've been loyal to you and to the country for a long time. So, that's another discussion. So then, you've got this moon, which is in It's exaltation, it's in the 4th house, but it's just come off a square with Pluto in the 2nd house. And so there's a need for more stability, and there's not stability right now. There's tension between all of these changes and what the oligarchs are doing in the system behind our backs. There is tension there. And then, Venus is really unaspected in this chart. And there's a lot of concerns about, Venus is going to be squaring or in, let's see, sextile relationship. So it's going into an aspect. So it's not void, it's not unaspected. But anyway, there's a lot of painful rhetoric around our partners. The Mars here is nasty, and it's stoking a lot of nastiness in the community, and not being very good with the martial energy. Venus is not all roses. It is also very present in war charts and things like that. So there's this stoking right now of our partners, and what we're going to muscle out of them, which is going to have long-term effects for us, good or bad. And so we don't really know exactly where we're headed. And Neptune there is in a little bit of a hazy place, is just conjunct Neptune, and the North Node has just conjunct. And I talk about this in a deep dive that I did. This is actually the day of the conjunction. I didn't realize it was the day also Jupiter went direct, but this is the day of the exact conjunction, and there's a cycle. And so in the cycle that I talked about in my other video, we're headed toward a recession, a pretty significant one, I would say. Okay, so full moon in Leo. Let's talk about that finally. Okay, so the full moon in Leo is going to be on February 12th, and I'm placing this in Washington, D.C. again, and it's called the Queen's Moon, and it's an interesting description of what's happening right now. Because during the waxing period, the archetypes are performers. Now Leo comes into her own and moves into a period of being a ruler. She's very careful about who she lets herself be vulnerable to. She has a good deal of pride, and she tends to put her pride ahead of her willingness to let people come too close. This can mean that she can find herself lonely, and a lonely Leo moon acts out in order to get more attention. And the other danger in the moon, in this moon, is that the queen may overreach herself. Unlike the king, which is the disseminating moon in Leo, the full moon energy of the queen spreads its light over her whole country, but no further. If she extends herself beyond the limits of her reach, her light fades and she loses control of those edges at the edge of her kingdom. She is at her best ruling a smaller and more intimate kingdom where people come to her. At her best, she combines the energy of Leo, bonfire, and the full moon, drawing people into her circle. In the Queen's Moon, we take a charge of a situation, and it's a day for leadership. So this is from Raven Caldera's full moon phase astrology. I got this description, and it's a really great description. And I'm just pointing out here that the moon is in Mercury is in the beams of the sun, and it is also on the degree of that moon that I circled in when Uranus went direct. So there's probably going to be some communication around those, that time period, the crash, and what's happening behind the scenes. And I also wanted to point out here that this full moon is very close to to, the moon, Leo moon is very close to Trump's Mars. And then this configuration with the sun and Mercury in Aquarius is very close to Musk's Mars. So there's an opposition here starting to happen between them. And also the full moon is on the Pisces degree and Mercury is on a Taurus degree. And we see that there's a T square with Uranus here. And so, the disagreement is really about what's going on behind the scenes. The Pisces degree is really about dissolving. And here we're dissolving some of our contracts and money in a very jolting way. But there's some breaking point, I think. There's some probably some cracks that are happening between Trump and Musk probably at this time. Musk's Mars is on his north node, and he gets a lot of people riled up because in human design, his Mars is on the degree of revolution and popular discontent. So he gets people all riled up who are upset at the government, and he makes a lot of noise, and people kind of start to follow him as a leader of that discontent. And then what happens in his wake, he destroys a lot of stuff. And it's, there's some things that he's been a part of that have been successful, but whether he's brought success to it is kind of up to debate. And, I wanted to point out that this degree is also the Sabian symbol is about self-reliance, and that's what we're starting to have to wake up to. We are no longer supported by our government and our institutions because they're being broken apart. And so we're going to have to rely on ourselves more as a country, but also as people in the country. And the more we are self-reliant, the less we depend on for our needs upon others who so often require us to be inauthentic or curbed, muted versions of ourselves. So thwarting our spiritual aspirations, having become disinterested in how we appear to the world, we must go on stage further and minimize that we require worldly comforts. So, a lot of people are going through this right now. If you're privileged and you've been relying on the government to help you out, there's, we're all going to have to cut back, I think, because all of this stuff is happening beyond our control. And so we're going to get some of the personalization of the consequences that we've put out into the world. And here is Pisces now intercepted again in the 12th, 6th house axis. And so there's a lot of fantasy going on behind the scenes of what we can do and what's going to happen. And again, Venus is here, it's rising. So people say, oh, it's going to be positive, but we still have Mars here in the 4th house, very, acting very childish and, acting out and being very tribal and really, people are concerned about their safety. It's trining Saturn, which is another malefic, and that's behind the scenes. So we're putting out a very strong language and making deals behind the scene. And whether that affects us positively or negatively is going to be seen, but we do have tension and cracks starting to show. Okay. And this full moon, if you wanted to compare it to a time period personally, it's related to August 16th of 23. And for me, this really is related to me. I'm going to be having my birthday is the day before, and my husband's North Node is on this degree, Aquarius Leo axis. And there was a lot about his job that was happening. during this time. And we've been kind of shaky on the job front too, so we've been personally impacted by all of these changes. And especially for me, because I could no longer be a part of a system that I could not ethically stand by anymore. And so I'm trying to figure out where I'm going. And that's hard because there's not a lot that's clear from the perspective of where I have experience. I'm trying to make a living in astrology. It's very hard to do that, even if you're really good at it. I have some friends who are just amazing with how they promote themselves and gaining a lot of audience, and still it's very limited to how much money you can make. But money is not everything. And so, but it's, you have to survive. And I think everybody's concerned about that right now and making decisions based on that. What do I need to take care of myself and my family? And so people get a little bit more reactive in that way and follow where they need to follow. You have little choice sometimes. And so the first quarter moon of this new moon was in May of 15th, 2024. So if you follow the events, if you track events like I do, you'll probably see themes. I usually do, especially if it's a personal connection to my chart. And so we're seeing the financial disruption already. There's a clash of values about how we should do this. And on February 11th, a Neptune, from a human design perspective, or February 10th, I think, Neptune has gone out of the gate of crisis, where there's a lot of hidden things going on and things that we can't see. And now it's gone back into gate 25. It was there for a little bit last year. And so we're going to see, because the North Node is in the gate of crisis now, we're going to see the crisis more clearly. But there's going to be also kind of confusion about who's innocent and who isn't. So there's going to be a veiling there. You can't trust what you see out there in the world unless you just have a good sense of who's innocent or who's not innocent. So I would say take a skeptical view, take a step back, and try to not make any assumptions, because there's a lot of disinformation that's going on. It's very weird to me. I know that we haven't really been living in a democracy for a while. That's kind of a story that we're fed. But I've just been amazed that there's been so many arguments that people have been posting about why it's not good to live in a democracy. So now we're going toward, conditioning people that democracy isn't good. It's just amazing to me that that's happening. And so we're kind of going into this period where everybody's confused and dismayed. That's the point, I think. People have access to important information. We don't know what they're doing with it. Nobody's, has oversight over them. And even if there are fraud in the system, which very well there is, I'm sure of it, there still was this veneer of people watching, and now there's nothing. And so, it doesn't seem like to me that that's going to be fixed. It's going to be dismantled for sure, but it's going to go more and more into a fraud. It seems like it to me. That's my point of view. And so, like I said, the way people are being treated is really shameful, I think. But I don't know how to respond to that in a way that's helpful. So for me, I'm trying to figure out how to be productive with my judgments. I have a lot of judgments, but are they productive? Are they helpful? And then I just wanted to look really quickly at the Mars direct in Cancer chart. Because it's happening a few weeks after this, and Mars is going direct. It's right on the midheaven here. and it is opposing. It's applying to an opposition of the moon in Capricorn. Moon in Capricorn is in its fall, I think. I think it's in its fall. And so this energy is pretty damaging. I think there's an indication that there's economic hardship coupled with public unrest and protests. And then, it really is almost in a T-square relationship with Venus here, who's reached its 10th degree on the cusp of the 7th house. So, that could mean that there's international disputes, or, we already know that there are, but domestic security concerns, changes in leadership or government policy. And so it's, there's a crisis that's happening, and then there's turning points that's happening. So there's a conflict between the public's emotional needs and the government's actions and its focus. And here we have all of this energy in the 6th house, the health of the nation. And what's happening behind the scenes is really affecting that. And then, we've got Jupiter and Uranus here in the 8th house. So there's disruptions in our access to other people's money. But Jupiter is here, and it's going direct. It's on the cusp of the 9th house, but it is a little bit. It's a little bit of a, benefic energy, although with the sun below the horizon, it doesn't do too much help here. And Mars above the horizon is pretty destructive when you're talking about a night chart. So you've got Venus here, which is helpful. And so possibly that lends some benefit to our international discussions, but things are pretty dicey. And so I would say, and then we're having a lot of transformations in the 4th house beyond our control, and there's a lot about the Venus energies and who are our allies and who are our friends versus who are our enemies. So that's what's ahead. I think in your own life, how are you stepping up? How are you utilizing this time? Are you being a leader in the areas that you need to lead? Or, are you in a situation where you're feeling this capacity of overreach and trying to get attention and doing things that are outside of your scope of responsibility? And how are you getting attention, and what are the things that are most effective for you to take the lead in your own life? Okay, so that's it. I hope this was helpful, and I'm praying for everybody right now in this very difficult time. Bye.